The market was alive with cruel laughter. A cold wind blew through the iron cages, carrying the smell of rust, sweat, and hopelessness. Dozens of alien traders gathered around a raised metal platform, where a young alien girl stood in chains. Her skin was pale blue, covered with bruises and dust. Her eyes were wide, scared, and empty, like someone who had already given up. Next up, Lot 47, the auctioneer shouted, his voice echoing through the marketplace. A female worker from the fallen Raynari race. Weak, small, useless for mining, and not good for combat either. The crowd booed. Some aliens laughed. One shouted, "She's not even fit for scrap work." Another said, "Only good for meat." The laughter grew louder. The girl flinched at every word but didn't cry. She had no tears left. From a distance, a tall man watched silently. He wore a long coat with burn marks and a visor that covered half his face. A human, rare in this part of the galaxy. His name was Captain Jace Warren, a cargo pilot who once fought in wars no one remembered. His ship was old, his credits low, but his eyes, cold gray eyes, still carried something the rest of the galaxy had lost. Compassion. Jace leaned against a metal pole, his jaw tight as the auctioneer pushed the girl to her knees. She didn't resist. Her wrists were tied so tight that her blood was turning dark around the ropes. The auctioneer kicked her lightly and shouted, "Come on, someone take her!
1 unit of fuel.
Half a ration pack. Anything!" No one raised a hand. The silence was heavier than the laughter. The auctioneer looked around, frustrated. "She's worthless," he barked. "If no one buys, we'll send her to the meat pits by nightfall." The girl closed her eyes. Maybe that was better. Maybe it would finally end the pain. But then a voice broke through the noise. Calm. Human. "I'll take her." The crowd turned. The laughter stopped for a second. The auctioneer blinked. "You?" he asked. "A human? You want this thing?" Jace walked forward slowly. His boots clanged against the metal floor. Every alien stepped back, whispering about the crazy human who bought trash. Jace stopped beside the platform and looked up at the girl. She looked smaller up close, thin arms, messy hair shaking from hunger. He reached into his coat and threw a few old credit chips onto the table. "That should cover it." The auctioneer grinned. "You can have her, human. She's all yours." The chains were unlocked. The girl didn't move. She didn't believe it. The guard kicked her again. "Go with your new master." Jace frowned. He bent down and lifted her by the arm, gently, not like the others. "You can stand," he said. "You're free from them now." She looked up at him, confused. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Free? What? What does that mean?" Jace didn't answer. He just led her through the crowd, ignoring the mocking voices. "Human bought meat," someone shouted. "Maybe he's hungry," another yelled. But Jace kept walking. They reached the edge of the market where his small cargo ship waited in the dust. It was old and scratched, but it was home. The girl stumbled as she tried to walk. Her legs were too weak. Jace caught her before she fell. Inside the ship, everything was quiet. The air smelled of oil and metal. The girl looked around, afraid to touch anything. Jace pointed toward a small seat near the wall. "Sit," she obeyed silently. Her eyes followed him as he moved to the control panel. He pressed a few buttons and the ship's engines began to hum. Outside, the market faded into darkness. He turned to her again. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Rin," she said softly. "Just Rin." "All right, Rin," Jace replied. "You're safe here." She didn't believe him. She had heard words like that before. Safety was an illusion. Still, something in his voice, steady and quiet, made her want to believe even just a little. He handed her a metal cup filled with water. Her hands shook as she drank. It was the first clean water she'd tasted in months. Then he gave her a small food pack. She stared at it like it was treasure. "Eat," he said. "You need strength." She took a bite, chewing slowly. Then she looked at him again. "Why did you buy me?" she asked. Jace didn't look back. He just stared at the stars through the window. Because no one else did. Silence filled the cabin. The hum of the engines was the only sound. Rin pulled her knees to her chest and watched the strange human who had saved her from becoming meat. She couldn't understand him. No one ever helped her kind. As the ship lifted off, leaving the red planet behind, Jace spoke again, almost to himself. "Everyone deserves a chance." Rin closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't hope yet, but it was close. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, and the ship disappeared into their light, carrying two broken souls who didn't yet know that their meeting would change the fate of more than just themselves. The ship moved through the dark space quietly, its old engines humming like a heartbeat. Rin sat near the window watching stars drift by like slow-moving fireflies. Her hands still shook as she held the blanket Jace had given her. It was rough and worn, but it was warm. For the first time in years, she was not cold, not hungry, and not surrounded by shouting voices. Still, she couldn't rest. Her mind kept whispering. Why did the human by her Jace sat at the front of the cockpit, focused on the glowing controls? His face was calm, but his eyes were heavy. He hadn't spoken much since takeoff. When the ship's autopilot beeped, he stood and looked at her. She flinched a little, expecting anger, but he only said in a flat tone, "You can sleep in the back. There's a small room." Rin didn't move. "You don't want me to work?" she asked quietly. "Not tonight," Jace replied, walking toward the storage section. "You need rest before anything else." She followed slowly, unsure of his intentions. The room he showed her was small, filled with old crates, spare parts, and a thin mattress on the floor. To her, it looked like heaven. She touched the blanket gently, then looked at him again. "I don't understand you, human," she whispered. "You could have left me there." "Why bring me here?" Jace didn't answer right away. He picked up a broken tool and began to fix it, his hands moving with focus. After a moment, he said, "Because I saw something in your eyes. You hadn't given up completely." That was enough. Rin didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She sat on the mattress, her fingers tracing the fabric. Jace left the room and closed the door halfway, giving her space but not locking her in. She stayed awake for a long time, listening to the low hum of the ship, feeling strange safety wrap around her. Hours passed. The ship drifted into quieter zones of space. Jace checked the radar, then sat down with a tired sigh. His mind went back to the girl in the market. The way she didn't beg or cry, just stood like someone who had already accepted death. He couldn't explain why he acted. Maybe it was guilt, maybe pity, maybe something else he didn't want to name. The next morning, he walked back to the small room. Rin was sitting on the floor, fixing one of the crates with a small wrench. She looked up quickly when she heard his footsteps. "I wanted to help," she said softly. "I know how to fix small things. My people used to work in energy chambers." Jace nodded, impressed. "That's good. Keep doing what you can." Her face lit up just a little. She worked quietly while he prepared food. The ship smelled faintly of heated rations. Not much, but better than the filth she'd known before. He handed her a plate. She hesitated, unsure if she was allowed to eat first. Jace noticed and said, "Go on." "It's yours." Rin took a bite, then another. She didn't realize how hungry she had been until her stomach hurt. Between bites, she whispered, "I thought humans were cruel. That's what we were told." Jace looked at her, his voice steady. "We're all cruel when we stop seeing others as people. It happens to every race." Rin stared at him, confused but curious. He was unlike anyone she had met. He didn't treat her like property, didn't demand obedience, didn't raise his hand or voice. She wanted to ask more, but her tongue hesitated. The silence between them was strange, not heavy, not hostile, just quiet. Later that day, Jace went outside the ship's main hold to check the hull. Rin followed him, watching from a distance as he worked with his tools. The way he moved, focused, calm, strong, made her wonder who he really was. His scars told stories she couldn't guess. When he caught her watching, she looked away quickly, pretending to clean. That night, when Jace sat near the window, she approached slowly. "You said everyone deserves a chance," she said. "Do you really believe that?" He nodded without turning. "Yeah, because someone once gave me one." Her voice trembled. "And if I fail, then you try again," he said simply. "That's what life is." Rin didn't reply. She just stood there looking at him, then at the stars beyond the glass. The galaxy felt endless, but for the first time it didn't feel like a cage. When she went back to her small room, she touched the cold wall and smiled faintly. She didn't know what would happen next or if this strange human would keep her for long. But she knew one thing: he didn't see her as meat. Outside, the stars burned quietly as their ship glided through space, carrying two souls who didn't yet know they were beginning something far greater than survival. Days passed quietly in the vast ocean of space. The ship drifted through shining dust clouds and glowing stars, its metal body creaking like an old memory. Inside, Rin began to move with purpose. She no longer sat quietly in corners or avoided eye contact. She cleaned the tools, learned which buttons controlled which parts of the ship, and even started asking questions. Small ones at first. What this switch did, why that light blinked red. And Jace always answered in short, simple words. Jace noticed the change in her, but said nothing. He just watched her as she tried to learn everything she could. He respected effort more than words. Every morning she was awake before him, already checking the ship's systems or polishing the worn floor. She never asked for rest, never complained. The silence that had once filled the ship was slowly replaced by the sound of small footsteps, soft humming, and the occasional crash when she dropped a tool. One morning, the sound of alarms broke the peace. The ship shook suddenly. Jace rushed to the front. "Pirates," he muttered under his breath. A small group of scavenger ships appeared on the radar, circling them like hungry insects. Rin froze as the warning lights flashed across the walls. "Are we in danger?" she asked. "Yes," Jace said, pulling levers and checking screens. "Stay low. Don't move until I tell you." She wanted to obey, but something inside her refused to hide. As the first shot hit the hull, she ran toward the back to help. The impact knocked her off balance, but she grabbed a wrench and started sealing a leaking valve near the engine. Her hands shook, but she kept going, remembering everything Jace had shown her. In the cockpit, Jace steered hard to the right, trying to dodge the pirates' blasts. His face stayed calm, but sweat ran down his neck. He fired back, his ship's small cannons glowing blue. The old machine groaned but held strong. He didn't know that behind him, the girl he saved was now fighting to keep his ship alive. When he finally checked the engine feed, he saw her on the monitor, kneeling beside the damaged pipe, smoke curling around her. "Rin, get out of there," he shouted through the comm. Her reply came through static. "If I leave, the ship will burn." He clenched his fists. For a second, he almost cursed the decision to buy her. Then he saw how determined she looked, tiny, scared, but unbroken. He couldn't lose her. Not her. Jace switched to manual control, charged the boosters, and shot forward through the asteroid field. The pirates followed, but his moves were sharp, fast, almost reckless. The asteroids crashed behind them, blocking the pursuers. The ship trembled under the strain, but they made it out. When it was finally over, silence returned. The radar was clear. Jace stood, breathing heavily, and ran to the engine room. Smoke filled the corridor. Rin was there, sitting on the floor, covered in grease and soot. She looked up, coughing but smiling faintly. "Did we make it?" she asked. Jace knelt beside her, checking her hands. They were burned slightly, but she didn't complain. He nodded. "Yeah, you did good." Her eyes widened. "I did," he gave a small nod again. "You kept the ship alive. Couldn't have done it without you." Rin's smile was small, but it was real. For a moment, she forgot the fear, the chains, the laughter that once followed her name. She felt proud. Later, when the engines were quiet again, Jace brought her a small bottle of salve for her burns. She hesitated before taking it. "You could have left me," she said softly. "When they attacked, you could have escaped alone." He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "I don't leave people behind. Not anymore." She didn't understand what he meant, but she felt something change between them. The distance that once separated master and slave was gone. Now it felt like something new, something fragile but real. As the ship drifted once more under the stars, Rin sat beside the window again. This time she didn't look scared. Her reflection showed a girl reborn, her eyes alive with quiet strength. She whispered to herself, "I'm not meat. I'm not useless." Jace heard her but said nothing. He just watched her from the pilot seat, a faint shadow of a smile crossing his face. He had seen soldiers lose everything and never come back from it. But this girl, this fragile being from a race the galaxy had forgotten, was learning to stand again. When night came, Rin fell asleep near the glass, wrapped in her blanket. Jace turned down the lights, whispering words she couldn't hear. "You're stronger than you think." Outside, the ship floated through endless darkness, two small lights glowing within it, one from the cockpit, and one from the hope slowly returning to a broken heart. The days after the pirate attack passed slowly but peacefully. The ship moved through empty regions of space, its engines humming softly like a lullaby. Rin healed from her burns and spent her hours learning everything Jace allowed her to. She fixed panels, cleaned the tools, and asked quiet questions about stars, planets, and humans. Her voice was growing stronger, and sometimes Jace even caught her humming while she worked. But he also noticed something else. Fear still hid in her eyes. When he walked too close, she froze for a second before relaxing. When the scanners picked up distant signals, she always asked if they were coming for her. Jace didn't push her to talk, but he knew there was a story buried deep inside her silence. One night, when the stars outside glowed brighter than usual, Rin sat near the ship window staring into the void. Jace joined her with 2 cups of warm liquid protein. He handed one to her without a word. She took it and held it close for warmth. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Rin's voice broke the silence. "My people weren't always slaves," she said quietly. "We used to live in floating cities above our world's oceans. We had energy crystals that powered everything. Our blood carried the same energy." Jace turned to her slowly. "Energy in your blood," she nodded. "That's why they came. The traders. The hunters. They took us because we were valuable, alive or dead." Her voice cracked. "When they killed my mother, they called her a battery." Jace's jaw tightened. He had seen cruelty in many forms during wars, but something about this felt worse. Rin continued, her hands shaking as she spoke. "They took me when I was small. Said I was weak, said I wasn't worth keeping, sold me cheap from one owner to another. Every time someone looked at me, I waited for them to say it, only good for meat." Her words hung heavy in the air. Jace didn't interrupt. He just listened, letting her speak without judgment. She had carried those memories alone for too long. Finally, she asked, "Why do you care, human? You could sell me. You could trade me for credits. You could forget me." He leaned back in his seat and looked at the stars. "Because I've been where you are. Not in chains, but close enough." She turned to him, confused. "You?" Jace nodded slowly. "I fought in the frontier wars. I followed orders that destroyed whole colonies. I watched innocent people burn because someone higher decided they were the enemy. I was just another soldier then. When it was over, everyone went home pretending nothing happened. I couldn't." Rin stared at him. For the first time, she saw something behind his calm face. Guilt. Heavy, old guilt. He looked back at her and said quietly, "Saving you didn't fix what I did, but it reminded me I can still make a choice that means something." The silence after that wasn't empty. It was warm, filled with understanding that didn't need words. Later that night, as Jace checked the ship's navigation, Rin appeared at his side. "There's something else you should know," she said softly. "The ones who hunted us, they still control the outer sectors. Their leader keeps my people in cages. He calls himself the Collector. He knows I escaped." Jace frowned. "How?" "Because he marked every one of us." She turned her arm, showing a faint glowing scar near her wrist. "It lets him track us. It's weak now, but still active." Jace moved closer, studying the mark. "We'll remove it," he said firmly. "You can't," she whispered. "It's deep. It's tied to my blood." Jace didn't accept that. "Then we'll find someone who can." Rin looked at him with wide eyes. "You'd do that for me?" He shrugged lightly, but there was determination in his voice. "I didn't bring you here to let them find you again." She lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "If they catch us, they'll kill you too." He smiled faintly, a tired but fearless smile. "Let them try." Rin stared at him, unsure whether he was brave or foolish. Maybe both. But his words made her heart feel lighter. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't running from her problem. They were standing beside her. That night, she couldn't sleep. The hum of the ship, the stars outside, the quiet breathing of the man who had bought her life. It all mixed into something new inside her. Something she hadn't felt since she was a child. Hope. She touched the glowing mark on her wrist and whispered softly, "You'll never own me again." In the front cabin, Jace sat awake, watching radar screens and thinking about her story. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became. This wasn't just about saving one girl. It was about breaking something much bigger. When dawn light touched the edges of the stars, Jace set a new course into unknown space. The Collector wouldn't come to them. They would go to him, and this time he wouldn't be fighting for orders or survival. He'd be fighting for someone who had been called worthless, but had more strength than anyone he'd ever met. The engines roared to life as the ship turned toward the dark side of the galaxy, carrying a human haunted by guilt and an alien girl burning with quiet courage toward a war neither of them fully understood, but both were ready to face. The ship moved deeper into the outer sectors where no law existed, and only the strong survived. Stars looked colder here, like silent eyes watching from the dark. Jace knew this was dangerous space, but he had made his choice. He wasn't turning back. Rin stood beside him at the control panel, her hands trembling slightly as she looked at the map filled with red warning zones. "You don't have to come," Jace said quietly without looking at her. Rin shook her head. "He took everything from my people. I'm not hiding anymore." There was no fear in her voice now, only fire. Jace saw that strength and nodded once. "Then we do this together." They started their hunt slowly. Jace used his old war contacts to track smuggler routes where the collector's ships passed. Rin listened carefully, learning how to decode signals, how to spot a fake transmission, how to see patterns in chaos. She was quick, sharp, and focused. Every time she learned something new, her confidence grew. At night, they slept little. The stars never rested, and neither did guilt or memory. Sometimes Rin woke up sweating from dreams of cages and metal floors. Sometimes Jace woke up seeing faces from wars long gone. But in those quiet hours, when they spoke softly about their pasts, they began to understand each other in ways neither expected. One morning, the radar blinked. A signal, weak but familiar. Rin looked at it and froze. "That's one of the collector's ships," she whispered. Jace adjusted the scanner. "Cargo type matches slave transport. This could be it." Without hesitation, he set the course and powered up the thrusters. The ship groaned, metal shaking from the sudden push. Rin strapped in, eyes fixed on the radar. "What will we do when we reach them?" "Board them," Jace replied simply. "Free whoever's inside." It sounded impossible, but Rin didn't argue. She had already seen what this human could do when pushed. They found the transport drifting near a dying moon. Its lights flickered weakly and its shields were half broken. Jace maneuvered closer, staying below their sensors. "Old trick," he said. "They won't see us coming." Rin checked her small blaster nervously. Jace handed her a helmet. "Stay behind me. Only shoot if you have to." She nodded. The airlock hissed open, and they stepped into the enemy ship. The corridors were dark and smelled of rust and fear. They moved silently, hearing only the faint sound of distant machinery. When they reached the cargo hold, Rin's heart stopped. Inside were dozens of aliens, weak, chained, their eyes empty like hers once were. She rushed to them, but Jace held her back. "We have to take out the guards first," he whispered. There were 4 guards at the door, half asleep and not expecting anyone. Jace moved fast, striking with silent precision. One fell, then another. Rin stood frozen for a moment, then picked up a weapon from the floor and aimed shakily. When the last guard turned toward her, she fired. The energy blast hit him square in the chest. Her hands trembled, but she didn't drop the weapon. The prisoners stared as Jace broke their chains. "You're free," he said firmly. "Hide near the escape pods. Wait for my signal." Rin helped a small child stand up, whispering comforting words in her native tongue. The child looked at her like she was a ghost from a story, someone who came back when everyone else disappeared. They reached the control room next. On one of the screens, a message blinked. Transmission sent. "The collector knows," Jace cursed under his breath. "We need to leave now." But Rin stepped closer to the console, eyes wide. "Wait, I can see their database. Names, locations, my people. He keeps records of everyone he captured." Jace looked at the screen, hundreds of names scrolling fast. "Can you copy it?" She nodded and pressed a few keys, downloading everything into a small drive. "Got it," alarms blared suddenly. The ship shook as enemy reinforcements approached from orbit. "Time's up," Jace said, pulling her hand. They ran back to the escape pods as red lights flashed across the halls. Behind them, freed prisoners followed, fear replaced by desperate hope. As they launched away, the transport exploded in a burst of blue light. Rin watched it vanish into smoke. "That's one less ship," she said softly. Jace looked at her. And one step closer to the collector. Later, back on their own ship, Rin sat quietly holding the small data drive. "You risked everything today," she said. "So did you," Jace replied. "You're not the same girl I met in that market." She smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but I still feel like her sometimes." He leaned back in his chair. "Then keep moving. The past can't catch you if you don't stop." Outside, the stars stretched endlessly as they set a new course. The data drive blinked softly in Rin's hands, a map to her people's pain but also their hope. The hunt had only just begun, and now they had a direction, a purpose, and something far stronger than revenge: belief. The ship floated through the silence of deep space, carrying with it the weight of the raid and the faces of those they saved. Rin sat by the viewport watching distant stars burn softly, thinking about the prisoners who now had a chance to live again. Jace sat at the console, scanning through the stolen data drive. The more he read, the darker his expression became. The files weren't just lists of names, they were blueprints, research notes, and genetic records. The Collector wasn't only enslaving the Rhinari people, he was experimenting on them. Jace's voice was quiet but hard. He's not a traitor. He's running a lab. He's using your blood for something. Rin looked up sharply. Using it for what? Jace didn't answer at first. He turned the screen toward her. The file displayed a series of diagrams, human bodies mixed with alien anatomy. Hybrid soldiers, he said finally. He's trying to create something new. Rin stared at the images, her throat tight. That's why he hunts us. That's why he won't stop. Jace closed the file, his jaw set. Then we stop him. They spent the next few days tracing the coordinates hidden in the files. Each point led them closer to the Collector's central fortress, a massive orbital base known as Virulon Station. The station was hidden near a dying sun, surrounded by debris fields and old war wrecks. It was a graveyard of metal, and at its heart the Collector ruled. As they prepared for the mission, Rin's nerves grew heavy. She had come so far from the broken girl in chains, but now the thought of facing him again made her hands shake. Jace noticed and said quietly, "You don't have to be fearless. Just don't stop moving." That night, Rin couldn't sleep. She walked to the cockpit where Jace sat watching the star maps. "You've fought before," she said softly. "You know what happens when we lose." He looked at her with tired eyes. "Losing isn't dying. It's stopping before you should." She thought about his words, then took a deep breath. "Then I won't stop." When they reached the edge of Virulon space, the station appeared like a giant shadow blocking the light of the dying sun. Its towers stretched upward like dark fingers scraping the void. The scanner showed hundreds of heat signatures, guards, drones, and captives. Jace studied the layout carefully. "If we hit the power cores first, we can disable the defense grid. Then we go for the central lab." Rin nodded. Her fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. They slipped through the wreck fields using the ship's stealth mode. Once close enough, they docked under the main reactor platform. The moment they stepped inside, the air felt heavy. The walls pulsed faintly with energy drawn from the same kind of crystals her people once protected. Rin whispered, "He's using our world's core energy. He's destroying what's left of it." Jace moved quickly, placing charges along the power lines. "Then we make sure he never uses it again." They reached the inner chamber where glass pods lined the walls. Inside each pod was a hybrid, half Rhinari, half something else, alive but not awake. Rin's stomach twisted as she saw familiar faces among them. Her people were being turned into weapons. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them. A voice followed, smooth, cold, and filled with confidence. "I knew you'd come back, little one." Rin turned slowly. The Collector stood at the doorway, tall and dressed in silver armor that shimmered like oil. His eyes glowed faintly blue and his smile was calm. "You could have lived quietly, but instead you brought me a human." How ironic. Jace stepped forward, placing himself between them. "You're done." The Collector laughed softly. "Do you think I built all this to be stopped by a war ghost and a broken experiment?" Rin's voice was low but steady. "You called me weak. You called me meat. Look at me now," he smirked. "Still fragile. Still predictable." Before he could move, Jace fired first. The shot hit the console beside the Collector, sparks flying. Guards stormed in, weapons raised. Chaos filled the room. Jace fought with controlled fury, his movements sharp and efficient. Rin ducked behind the pods, firing back, protecting the hybrids inside from stray blasts. Then a blast of blue energy hit Jace, throwing him across the floor. Rin screamed his name and ran to him. He was bleeding, his breathing uneven. The Collector raised his weapon again, smiling coldly. "See what happens when you fight fate." Rin's mark on her wrist began to glow, brighter than ever before. She didn't understand why, but she felt something awaken inside her. The Collector stepped back in surprise. "Impossible," he whispered. "Your kind doesn't have that power." She stood tall, her eyes glowing the same blue as his weapon. "You took it from us. I'm taking it back." Energy pulsed through her body, cracking the floor beneath her feet. The Collector fired, but his shot dissolved in the light surrounding her. Rin reached forward, and the energy from the reactor surged through her veins, overloading the entire chamber. The lights exploded one by one as alarms wailed. Jace opened his eyes weakly, watching her standing in the center of the chaos, no longer a prisoner or victim, but something powerful, something free. When the blast cleared, the collector was gone. His armor shattered, his lab in ruins. Rin fell to her knees, exhausted but alive. Jace dragged himself to her side and whispered, "You did it." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "No, we did." The ship alarms rang again. The station was collapsing. Jace helped her stand, and together they ran for the escape route as fire and light tore through the halls behind them. Outside, the stars swallowed the explosion, leaving silence once more. The explosion faded behind them like a dying sun. Their ship drifted through the blackness, scarred but alive. Jace sat at the controls, his arm bandaged, his face pale from blood loss. Rin sat beside him, still weak from the surge of power that had torn through her body. The glow on her wrist had dimmed, but faint light still pulsed under her skin like a heartbeat. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had seen, lost, and survived. When Rin finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Do you think he's gone?" Jace's eyes stayed on the stars ahead. "Maybe not. Men like him don't vanish so easily. But his empire is broken now." She looked down at her hands, remembering the moment she had faced the collector. The energy that had burned through her veins was still alive somewhere deep inside. It frightened her, but it also felt like part of her truth. "I didn't know I could do that," she whispered. Jace turned to her. "You didn't need to. You just needed to believe you could." His words stayed in her mind as the ship entered the next star system. They landed on a quiet moon covered in silver mist and soft blue light. It was peaceful, untouched, a place that felt almost sacred. Jace needed to repair the engines, and Rin needed to rest, but neither could ignore what they had become. She helped him set up a small camp near the ship. They sat under the open sky, the ground glowing faintly beneath them. The light reflected in her eyes as she asked, "What happens now?" Jace stared at the horizon. "You have your people's data. You could rebuild what was lost, find them, free them." Rin shook her head slowly. "Not without you," he gave a tired smile. "I'm not your mission, Rin." She looked at him, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You were never my mission. You were my choice." For a moment, he didn't know what to say. The stars above them shimmered like slow-moving waves. Jace thought of all the lives he had taken in wars he didn't understand, all the guilt he had carried for so long. And here she was, someone who should have hated him, who had every reason to fear him. But she chose to stay. Later that night, Rin walked toward a small pool of glowing water. She looked at her reflection, the same face that once stared back from a cage, now calm and strong. She placed her hand on the surface, watching soft ripples spread out. "They called me unfit for anything," she murmured. "Only good for meat. But you saw something different." Behind her, Jace's voice was quiet. "I didn't see what you were. I saw what you could be." She turned, meeting his eyes. "And what is that?" He paused before answering. "Hope." For the first time, she smiled without pain. The word felt strange but right. Hope. A simple word, yet powerful enough to rebuild worlds. The next morning, they received a weak transmission from one of the freed prisoners. The message was short but clear. Others were rising. The collector's empire was falling apart as his slaves turned on their masters. The stolen data Rin had saved was spreading across the sectors, awakening courage in places long forgotten. Jace played the message twice, then looked at her. "You started something bigger than both of us." Rin didn't answer. She walked outside, feeling the light wind against her skin, and looked up at the stars. "Maybe it's time my people stopped running. Maybe it's time they saw that humans can stand beside us." He joined her, standing quietly at her side. For a long moment, they just watched the endless sky, neither needing words. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, filled with something like understanding. Before leaving the moon, Rin placed a small crystal near the glowing pool. It was one of the few relics from her world she still carried. She whispered, "For those who couldn't be saved." Jace watched her, then gently put a hand on her shoulder. "They'd be proud of you." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and light. "And you, Jace Warren? Will you ever forgive yourself?" He hesitated. "Maybe not. But helping you, it's a start." They returned to the ship. The engines rumbled softly, ready to move again. As the moon faded behind them, the stars ahead seemed brighter, as if the universe itself was opening new paths for them. Rin sat in the co-pilot seat and turned to him. "Where to now?" Jace smiled faintly. "Wherever there's someone left in chains," she nodded, her eyes glowing faintly again. "Then let's free them." The ship lifted into the air, leaving a trail of silver light behind. Rin leaned back, her heart calm. She was no longer the frightened girl from the auction. She was a survivor, a fighter, and a symbol for those still trapped in the dark. As the ship vanished into the stars, Jace glanced at her one last time before focusing on the endless horizon. "Everyone deserves a chance," he murmured, and this time, she believed him. The stars welcomed them home, shining like a promise that even in the coldest corners of the galaxy, hope could still burn bright, and two lost souls could find redemption not through power or revenge, but through compassion and courage that no one could ever cage again.